Every year, on October 31st, millions of people dress in costumes, carve pumpkins, and celebrate Halloween without ever asking where it truly began. Before the candy, before the plastic masks, before Halloween became a billion-dollar holiday, there was Samhain, a night when ancient Celts believed the dead could walk among the living, when bonfires blazed on hilltops to appease dark gods, when blood was spilled, not in horror movies, but on sacred stones. What if I told you Halloween began with real blood, real fire, and gods that demanded both? Close your eyes for a moment. Picture ancient Ireland, 2,000 years ago. Before cities, before Christianity, before history was even written down. The landscape stretches endlessly beneath a gray sky, rolling hills crowned with standing stones, forests so dense and dark that sunlight barely penetrates. And scattered across this wilderness, small settlements of Celtic tribes, huddled around fires that never die. Time here moves differently. The Celts don't measure months like we do. For them, there are only two seasons, light and dark, summer and winter, life and death. And between these two worlds, between life and death, there lies a single night. October 31st, the moment when summer dies and winter is born. The Celts called it Samhain, meaning summer's end. But Samhain was far more than just a seasonal marker. It was the Celtic New Year, a threshold, a doorway between worlds. The ancient druids, the priests, the mystics, the keepers of sacred knowledge, believed that on this night something catastrophic happened to reality itself. The veil between our world and the other world dissolved. The other world, Tir Nanog, the realm of spirits, of fairy folk, of ancient gods who once walked the earth. For 364 days, this realm remained sealed, hidden, separate. But on Samhain, that barrier vanished completely, and what came through was not always friendly. The Celts believed that spirits of the dead would return to their former homes on this night, seeking warmth, seeking food, seeking connection with the living. Some came with good intentions, ancestors watching over their descendants, protecting their bloodlines, offering guidance from beyond. But others returned with darker purposes. Malevolent entities, things that had never been human. Spirits wearing human faces like masks, moving through villages in search of souls to claim, bodies to inhabit, or simply whisper, chaos to spread. Imagine that terror. You couldn't tell who was human and who wasn't. That shadow moving past your window in the darkness, was it your neighbor or something else? Something ancient and hungry, pretending. So the Celts developed rituals, protections, desperate measures to survive the night when the dead walked freely. First, they extinguished every fire in their homes, every hearth, every candle, every flame snuffed out completely, plunging entire villages into absolute darkness. Why? Because fire was sacred, fire was power, and the old fires carried the energy of the dying year. They had to die too. Then the druids would gather on sacred hilltops and light a massive communal bonfire using nothing but friction and ritual, creating what they called new fire. Pure flame, sacred flame, flame that could ward off evil. Picture the scene. Hundreds of people gathered in the darkness, watching as sparks slowly catch, as smoke begins to rise, as flame erupts into the night sky like a prayer made visible. The fire grows larger, brighter, hotter, until it becomes a beacon you can see for miles. This wasn't just light. This was a weapon against the darkness. From this central fire, each family would carry embers back to their homes, rekindling their hearths with blessed flame. The smoke was believed to carry protective properties. Cattle were driven between twin bonfires to purify them before the harsh winter months ahead. But perhaps the most fascinating ritual, the one that echoes loudest into our modern Halloween, was the practice of wearing disguises. The Celts would don animal skins and grotesque masks carved from hollowed animal heads, stags, goats, bears, wolves. They would blacken their faces with ash from the sacred fires. They would wear their cloaks turned inside out. They would move through the darkness deliberately looking wrong. But what if I told you the masks weren't to scare? They were to survive. Because if you couldn't identify the monsters, then the monsters couldn't identify you. This wasn't playful dress-up. This wasn't entertainment. This was psychological warfare against the supernatural. If the spirits couldn't distinguish between human and spirit, between living and dead, between this world and the other world, then perhaps they would pass you by. Perhaps they would think you were one of them. The first Halloween costumes weren't meant to frighten other humans. They were meant to become invisible to the dead. And as the Celts moved through Samhain night, faces blackened, bodies disguised, identities erased, they participated in something profound. They weren't celebrating darkness. They were negotiating with it. Now, we entered darker territory. The question that historians debate with careful words, academic caution, and uncomfortable silences. Did the Celts practice human sacrifice during Samhain? The truth is lost to the flames of history, but the evidence remains. Let me show you what we know. First, there are the bodies. Across Ireland and Britain, archaeologists have discovered something disturbing. Bog bodies, remarkably preserved corpses dating back to the Iron Age, their skin turned leather brown by the acidic peat, their last moments frozen in time. These weren't accidental deaths. These weren't murders or casualties of war. These were rituals. Lindau man, discovered in Cheshire, England. His skull fractured, his throat cut, a cord twisted around his neck. He was killed 3 ways simultaneously, what archaeologists call a triple death. Old Crogan man, found in Ireland, arms bound with hazel rope, stabbed in the chest, decapitated. His last meal? Milk and cereals, consumed in late summer or early autumn. Around the time of Samhain. Clonycavan man, crowned with a strange gel made from plant oil and pine resin, styled hair that suggests high status, killed with brutal axe blows to the head and torso, his body placed deliberately in a bog near an ancient boundary between kingdoms. These men were well fed before death. They wore armbands suggesting nobility. Their deaths were ceremonial, deliberate, sacred. They weren't criminals being executed. They were offerings. But offerings to what and why? Second, we have the Roman accounts. Julius Caesar himself wrote about druidic practices. He described massive wicker figures, colossal human-shaped cages woven from branches, towering over the landscape like giants made of wood. According to Caesar, the druids would fill these structures with livestock, with criminals, with prisoners of war, and then set them ablaze as offerings to the gods. He wrote, "They believe that unless the life of a man is offered for the life of a man, the mind of the immortal gods cannot be appeased." But here's the problem. Rome was justifying its conquest. What better way to paint your enemies as savages than to describe them as bloodthirsty pagans burning people alive? Roman propaganda was sophisticated, effective, and it's still echoing through history, shaping what we believe about the Celts. So, we can't take Caesar's word as truth, but we also can't dismiss it entirely. Third, there are the stories. Irish mythology is soaked in blood. Tales passed down through generations, eventually written down by Christian monks centuries later. Stories of the Morrigan, goddess of death, fate, and war, appearing at Samhain to demand tribute. Stories of the god Crom Croach, who allegedly required the sacrifice of firstborn children. The Dagda, the good god, would meet with the Morrigan at the river Unius each Samhain, where their union ensured victory in the coming year's battles. Blood and sex and divine power intertwined. These stories blend myth and memory in ways we can no longer separate, but they reveal something crucial. The Celts understood that life required death, that survival demanded sacrifice, that maintaining cosmic balance had a price. And what we can say with absolute certainty is this: the Celts practiced animal sacrifice extensively. Sheep, cattle, horses, pigs, their bones have been found in ritualistic contexts across Celtic archaeological sites, arranged in patterns, buried in sacred ground, dated specifically to autumn festivals. These animals were slaughtered during Samhain, their meat used for communal feasts, their blood offered to appease the spirits. Because blood was power. Blood was currency between worlds. Picture it now, Samhain night, a massive bonfire illuminating hundreds of faces, some human, some masked, all flickering between light and shadow like figures from a nightmare. The druids stand before an altar stone. They wear white robes that glow in the firelight. Crowns of mistletoe, the sacred plant that grows between earth and sky, between life and death, adorn their heads. The animal is brought forward, a white bull, perhaps, sacred, chosen, prepared. The crowd grows silent. The only sounds are the crackling fire and the bull's breathing. A ceremonial bronze blade is raised. Words are spoken in a language older than Latin, older than Greek, words that call to gods whose names we've forgotten. And then the blade descends. Blood flows across the altar stone into carved channels designed specifically for this purpose, directed toward the earth, toward the underworld, toward the realm where spirits dwell. The people watch. They witness. They participate in maintaining the cosmic balance between this world and the next. The meat is divided, shared, consumed in a sacred feast that binds the community together through blood and fire. And as they eat, as the bonfire burns, as the night deepens around them, they know. They understand something we've forgotten. That death demands acknowledgement. That the darkness demands respect. And that ignoring the shadows doesn't make them disappear. It only makes them hungrier. Fast forward several centuries. Christianity spreads across Europe like dawn breaking over ancient forests. Monasteries rise where stone circles once stood. Churches are built atop sacred pagan sites. And the old gods? They're rebranded as demons, devils, evil spirits to be feared and cast out. But here's what the church quickly realizes. You can kill people. You can burn their temples. You can ban their rituals. But you can't erase tradition from the human soul. Samhain was woven too deeply into Celtic culture. It marked the harvest's end, the coming of winter, the turn of the year itself. It was survival wrapped in spirituality. People needed this festival, practically and psychologically. So the church faced a choice. Eradicate these traditions through force, creating martyrs and resistance? Or absorb them, transform them, baptize the darkness and make it holy? They chose the latter.
In 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV established May 13th as All Saints' Day, a Catholic holy day honoring martyrs and saints. But something wasn't working. The timing felt wrong. The energy wasn't there. People continued practicing the old ways in autumn, regardless of what the Church decreed. So in the 9th century, Pope Gregory III made a calculated move. He shifted All Saints' Day to November 1st, the day immediately after Samhain, not by accident, not by coincidence, by design. Later, November 2nd became All Souls' Day, a time to pray for the dead still in purgatory, awaiting entry into heaven. The Church had essentially created a Christian framework around the exact dates when Celts believed the dead walked. All Saints' Day became All Hallows' Day. The night before, All Hallows' Eve. Hallows' Eve. Halloween. Halloween. And just like that, the ancient festival of blood and fire was reborn in a new disguise.
The bonfires continued, but now they were blessed by priests rather than druids. The costumes evolved, now representing saints and angels alongside demons and devils. The offerings of food transformed into soul cakes, small pastries given to the poor who would pray for the dead in exchange. This practice was called souling. People would go door to door, singing songs, offering prayers for deceased family members, receiving food as payment. Sound familiar? Meanwhile, the Irish belief in mischievous spirits led to a peculiar tradition. They would carve turnips and potatoes into grotesque faces with hollow interiors, placing candles inside to create lanterns that would ward off evil. When Irish immigrants brought this tradition to America in the 19th century, they discovered pumpkins, larger, easier to carve, and far more dramatic. The jack-o'-lantern was born from ancient protective magic, translated through Christian Europe, and reimagined in the New World. But beneath the surface, beneath the Christian veneer, the old stories persisted. In rural Ireland and Scotland, people still told tales of the puka, a shape-shifting creature that emerged specifically on Samhain night to cause mischief or worse, of the banshee's wail signaling imminent death, of the Dullahan, a headless horseman riding a black stallion, carrying his own severed head, stopping at houses to call out the names of those destined to die before next Samhain. These weren't children's stories meant to entertain. These were warnings. Cultural memory preserved through narrative, passed down from generation to generation. The Church could rebrand Samhain. It could overlay Christian symbolism onto pagan bones. It could claim victory over the old gods. But it couldn't erase the primal recognition that something shifts on October 31st. that the atmosphere changes, that reality feels thinner. Even as Halloween became increasingly secularized, especially in 20th century America, that underlying current remained. The candy and parties and costumes became playful surfaces covering something ancient and unexamined. We dress as monsters without remembering we once did so for survival. We carve faces into pumpkins without recalling we once believed those faces would repel actual demons. We tell ghost stories without acknowledging we're participating in a tradition thousands of years old, designed to prepare the living for encounters with the dead. The rituals transform, but the ritual itself endures. The marking of this specific time as sacred, as dangerous, as a moment when the rules of reality bend. So where does that leave us? Modern Halloween is a spectacle, a billion-dollar industry of manufactured scares and consumer products. Costumes are purchased online. Pumpkins come from grocery stores. The scariest thing most people encounter is their credit card bill. We've sanitized the darkness, made it marketable, turned ancient terror into theme park attractions and family-friendly entertainment. But something lingers. Walk outside on Halloween night, not during the early evening when children are trick-or-treating, but later, after midnight, when the decorations look less festive and more uncanny. When the carved pumpkins have burned down to smoldering darkness, when fog settles low across empty streets and the temperature drops. There's a feeling, an atmospheric shift that has nothing to do with commercialization or cultural appropriation or holiday capitalism. The feeling that you're being watched, that the shadows are deeper than they should be, that the boundary between imagination and reality has become negotiable. Perhaps that's what remains of Samhain. Not the literal belief in spirits crossing veils, but the psychological truth underneath.
The recognition that darkness, both external and internal, demands acknowledgement. The Celts understood something we've lost in our modern, sanitized, overlit world. They understood that denial makes darkness stronger, that pretending death doesn't exist doesn't make it less inevitable, that the shadows we refuse to look at grow teeth. Their rituals weren't about defeating darkness. They were about respecting it, living alongside it, creating structure around the chaos of mortality. When they lit those sacred fires on Samhain night, they weren't trying to banish the dark. They were creating a negotiated space within it, a circle of light where community gathered, where the living could acknowledge the dead, where fear could be named and thereby made survivable. We've lost that nuance in modern Halloween. We've kept the aesthetics while forgetting the purpose. But maybe, just maybe, there's value in remembering. not in recreating blood sacrifices, not in believing in literal spirits walking through walls, but in reclaiming Halloween as a time for authentic reflection on mortality, on the cycles of life and death that continue regardless of our comfort level, on the reality that we are all eventually going to become the ancestors someone might remember or forget.
The veil between living and dead grows thin on October 31st, not because of ancient magic, but because we collectively agree to remember, to pause, to acknowledge that beneath the sugar rush and costume parties, there's something more profound available, if we're willing to look. The Celts saw Samhain as New Year's Eve, the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, a liminal space for transformation, for releasing what must die so that something new can grow. Perhaps Halloween was never really about fear itself, but about remembering the darkness we came from, and the darkness we'll all return to. The bonfires of Samhain have burned for over 2,000 years. Their flames are now hidden beneath electric lights and manufactured scares. But fire remembers, blood remembers, and somewhere beneath the surface of our modern celebrations, the old ways are still breathing. Because the veil doesn't just thin for the dead, it thins for anyone who dares to look back. If this journey into the shadows has stirred something in you, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Obscure Links as we continue uncovering the dark historical legends the world has forgotten. The past is never truly dead. It's just waiting to be remembered. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, some traditions are older than civilization itself, and they're still watching.